When everyone is in the right seat on the bus, that's when success happens.
Okay.
Because really, if they're not in the right seat or they're not the right fit in their role, you get people deviating a little bit into different areas, and that makes a stressful culture. So
Mhm,
definitely having the right people in the right place and making sure that they understand what their role is, it's
mhm.
clear and it's easy to follow, that really makes the difference.
Good afternoon. We're so thrilled to be joined today by Brenell Dean, who is a partner at Sway Law and also starting her own business consulting practice. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brenell. We're so excited to have this conversation with you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So, I let's just get started with. I know you have experience managing people in corporate and non-for-profit sectors, in real estate and in law. So you have such a rich background to choose from. What have you noticed is key elements of that create cultures where high performance is sustainable rather than, a flash bright light that can burn out?
Well, you know what? Working across different high stress industries,
Hmm.
law, nonprofit, real estate investments, that's something that everything has in common. It's high risk, it's high stress, right?
Hmm.
I would say the key difference that I can see to successful organizations dealing with that burnout would be having a clear vision and mission of what their business stands for and getting the people excited. When they're
Mm.
excited about it, the stress becomes worth it. Every job's going to be stressful, but if you want people to really stick it out with you, they have to be excited and feel like they're truly a part of that team.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? It kind of even on the same side on personal, we have to have that purpose that gets us through the tough times and the high demands that we all face. Let me follow up a little bit on that. Of course, at the organizational level, it's so important to understand the vision and help people see it. But then also, but across the company, everybody has a different role to play in delivering that mission and vision. Do you see that play out in higher performing cultures or not, when people really understand their role towards delivering on that purpose?
When everyone is in the right seat on the bus, that's when success happens.
Okay.
Because really, if they're not in the right seat or they're not the right fit in their role, you get people deviating a little bit into different areas, and that makes a stressful culture. So
Hmm.
definitely having the right people in the right place and making sure that they understand what their role is, it's
Hmm.
clear and it's easy to follow, that really makes the difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. How about when we stepping back a little bit? How do we build, or how do you approach building this culture of, And I like to talk about it as sustainable performance, and to add your words into to aligned mission-driven goals that the organization is delivering.
So I've always followed hire for the character and train for the skill,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
At the end of it, if you're hiring people that are already aligned with your mission and your vision,
Hmm.
it's not a hard sell.
Easier.
And
Yeah.
they fall right into place. You train them exactly how you need them trained, and it will be so natural. You have to look for that character that already fits in with what your purpose is and your intent is. It always works better than, I'll say, picking someone that doesn't necessarily have that vision and mission, then they're faking it, right, to get the job. And unfortunately, it will lead them to burn.
Perfect. I was going to naturally ask you, what is the character that you look for, but you already kind of alluded to the fact that it actually has to fit the purpose and the mission. So there's no right or wrong in general, but there's right or wrong for that company at that time and the needs that they have.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Do
I can
you
give
have
you one you know what? I'll give you one
yes,
example.
please.
With the law firm, I did a investor-focused landlord representation.
Hmm.
That means that tenants sometimes get evicted, right?
Right.
So if right off the bat you have someone that, really has a heart for tenants and housing and things.
Right.
Right? It might not be the right fit. It will lead them to an emotional burnout. It will become very draining. Every company has its own purpose, whether it be nonprofit, for profit. I find once they truly understand the goal and the purpose, that that leader and those employees within the company have to understand that and have to be okay with it, or else they're gonna burn out.
That's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. Because, it would be easy to say you really want somebody very emotional in that role that can, understand or talk to families in need, let's say. But you're actually kind of like, yes, but those people will emotionally drain themselves probably, after an, I don't know, short period of time, right? So that's so interesting how it's not always, how you have to kind of really think through how these skills will play in that role longer term as well.
Exactly.
Okay. Is there some signs that you watch for or that you become aware of when you're, either joining a leadership team or building one where you're like, okay, that's become a signal for me that we have to look at this in a different way, because you say, okay, this could be raising some flags in the longer term that indicate, burnout or turnover markers, if you will.
I just look for authenticity. If I am meeting with someone and they are, I can tell they're faking it. They're trying to sell me on themselves as a product. That doesn't work with me. I want to see your authentic side.
Right.
How are you actually going to interact on a regular basis? That's what really sells it. If I find that someone's being, generic AI responses, they're not giving me,
Mm,
truthful answers or answers that, even make
mm.
sense. If I find that something doesn't line up in terms of does it align with the resume, do the skills match, it's just coming across as not authentic. And that's when you run into issues down the road. I would rather have someone be really candid. Hey, this is what I think about it. This is what I've done. And it might not align perfectly with the job description, but I'll appreciate any transferable skills or anything that I can leverage if it's authentic.
But that makes a lot of sense. I love that you're raising that point. And it's interesting to take us down that path of looking at authenticity as a signal for burnout as well. Because we can think about it as a signal for, fit for job and skills, etc. But so I just wanted to follow up a little bit more. I find that really interesting. Is it also, could you say that somebody who's not being themselves could indicate disengagement essentially from the role? So is that kind of the link you're seeing?
Yeah, well, I'm all for fake it until you make it, right?
Yeah.
But it gets tiring because at the end
Pulls on
of
your
the day, there
energy, right?
might be someone that already has it, and I find that if you have to fake it and push really hard during the interview, you're gonna have to keep that momentum going and fake it and push really hard every day to do the
Yes.
job. So it's a clear signal. This person's, forcing it during the interview. They're gonna have to force it day in and day out, which is exhausting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's actually the way you say it, it's like makes it so obvious. Like it's gonna pull on so much energy. You need that energy going to the role itself and building value and the team, not in kind of just showing up that day in the way that you've created. So that's it. I like the way to think about that. Is there any signals that you see from the workforce? Like, let's say you're already in, a team, and there's, of course, as a leader, you might have a good lens on, okay, we've really been pushing here with either transformation or big delivery, and you're like, okay, I also, kind of see this popping up, and are we pushing too hard, or this is a sign that we might need to give a break coming up, or something like that.
Well, it really goes back to the employer's business plan, right? Like if we're looking at it and we're saying, okay, we have to push so hard to reach our goals, to meet our
Mm,
our KPIs. If we're pushing that hard, we have to really revisit that and say, is there room
mm,
in the budget for another team member? What is missing? Is there a seat on the bus that's not
mm,
filled? Is there what's going on? That is an indicator that your business needs to take some additional steps and revisit the plan, the org structure, and everything if your team is constantly pushing at a high level on a regular basis. A one off because it's,
mhm.
busy time, okay. If it becomes something that you see on a regular basis, that's a red flag.
Yes, okay, that makes a lot of sense, and I like how you're always going back to that org level and org view and the plan forward. So it's not just on the, which is sometimes can be seen differently. It's seen as, let's say, burnout can be seen at the individual level, right? You're like, oh, and that's kind of the rhetoric that lives in society, sometimes in our own heads, right? That you're like, I'm not good enough to keep up with this, or others are, but I'm not. We have a tendency to put it on ourselves. Certainly, as managers, sometimes we have tendencies to put it on our team members, but you're taking it to the organizational level and actually saying, like, is the business plan in line with our delivering capabilities? And how do we build that sustainable performance at that level as well to create the space for individuals to deliver?
And you can tell if it's one person.
Yeah,
Okay, it's but if you're finding there's a whole team
right.
or a whole, sector or group of people, that's really a reflection on the company. You have to sit down and see, okay, what is going on? A one person, a one off, okay, do some team building, do a fun lunch, whatever you got to do. But if we're talking about this is ongoing, this is consistent, and let's say it could be one person, but if it's that role, if there's turnover in that role may need to be reevaluated. I find one of the biggest things that I see is companies think that their job description fits the role, and it misses the mark of what they actually do, because you're seeing it from a bird's eye view, right?
Okay.
You are seeing it from the top down.
Hmm.
You really need to look bottom, so your employees will drive that bus and gear what the role looks like.
Hmm.
It makes a difference. It really does.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. It's probably a balance, right? We're talking about a healthy balance of top down, bottom up, and room for that individual as well. Awesome.
Exactly.
Um, so I like some of these characteristics you've brought up of in hiring practices starts right at the beginning, clarity from the top, giving people room in their role. But what have you seen as the most effective in, there's lots said about leadership development, initiatives, projects, technology, etc. What have you seen in your experience that works where it works in developing more of that internal capability for leadership?
In my view, is 3 key things. I think the first one, again, having clarity in that role,
Yeah.
KPIs. When I talk to business owners and they don't know what their goals are, what their timelines are, the employees don't know. So that's number 1, is to be clear in what your expectations are as the employer. Number 2 would be having the right people in the right seat on the bus. The
Yep.
right person for the right job, that's really number 2. The 3rd one, nobody likes it, but it's really compensation. If you
Yep.
have the right person, they have to have a livable wage that suits them
Yep.
if they're the right fit, right? And you really have to think about that. You don't want the perfect fit and you just can't afford them. Right? You have to figure something out.
Yep, and it's a very practical point of parity. It's good to bring. Yeah, nobody likes it, but we have to talk about these things openly. And I know obviously there's a big push on transparency on pay, and ultimately you can give people lots of opportunities and the right things like that. But ultimately, people, yeah, need a living wage for sure.
Exactly, right? It's
Yeah,
that's always the little
yeah,
bit of a sour spot, but
no,
sometimes the role you need as a business owner, you just can't afford. So you have to find creative ways to say, well, what can I afford? What can I work with? What can fit here? It might not check all the boxes, because if I check all the boxes, I'm going to be underpaying the person, right? Your
yeah.
expectations have to be
To check
realistic.
your expectations. That yeah. Um, what about so when people come in, and I know this happens, and you've been a part of a growth company that you grow into acquisition, which is very commendable, and congratulations on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen people come in and, let's say, at an individual contributor level, wherever that may be. And then as company grows, more opportunities open up. That person, of course, has lots of knowledge, might not be at all in the area that they were even hired for. And we want to support them as they go in their career, like becoming maybe a team lead or a manager or director, ultimately, whatever the business needs are and the opportunities there. How do you handle, or have you handled, or have you seen things that work really great and kind of helping the person along the way kind of climb that experience, the ladder, if you will, but really kind of use their knowledge in a more advanced way through the company?
conscious of that area because
Yeah.
yes, we want to support employees in their career, but at the end of the day, if they were the perfect fit for that seat on the bus, again, elevating them because we can or because it's some type of incentive to keep working there is not always the best option. There are
Hmm.
other ways to incentivize employees. It doesn't always mean a promotion or a new position. I think really analyzing, again, back to that org level,
Yeah.
really analyzing, okay, where does everybody fit and who is the best fit? I see organizations that will put somebody in a role because it's time for a promotion. It's time I want to pay
Yeah.
them more, but I don't have money in their role. So I'm going to hire somebody for their role. And it's just doing a lot of workarounds that may not really hit the mark. There are other ways to incentivize employees in their career that maybe don't mean giving them a high or new position. So I'm really cautious there. I'm really cautious to go back and look at your structure.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So let me take advantage of the fact that to highlight that you really have worked in law, real estate, corporate settings, and non-for-profits as well, which is a really, sweep of industries and environments. What are some of the, and I know you spoke about it a little bit, saying, high performing there's a stress in high performance just for different reasons in different industries. So I just want to pick your brain a little bit on what you have seen as, very common, you know, even though they can look radically different, for-profit law and a non-for-profit can sound like a completely different environment. What are some of the key differences? Same challenges that they have, similarities and differences.
Yes. I would say the clientele, right? You're dealing with people and you have to set that expectation. So for example, law, right? You are dealing with clients, you're dealing with the opposing side. One's going to be happy, one's going to be mad, right? In the nonprofit sector, depending on the different industry you could be in there, you're usually dealing with a population that is struggling. So they're on one hand very grateful to have you, and on the other hand, mad about their situation, right?
Hmm.
Real estate, you're dealing with real estate investors, you're getting investors, they're oftentimes very happy to be a part of, the project, but sometimes they're still a
Right.
little bit burnt from a previous project that didn't pan out, right? You're corporate, I've worked with construction industry, you're dealing with people who have had work done, some work great. Again, some have been burnt in the past. It really goes down to you're dealing with the public and any position, even though it may not be a forward facing position, at some point or another, they may have to interact with the public. So you can have an employee that's happy in the back in the office,
Hmm.
doing the books or doing whatever, a one off client can set the tone for something really negative. And I think just preparing them for that expectation, even if it's not in their role per se, but making sure that they're aware of who are our clients, who are we dealing with.
Hmm.
That way they're not caught off guard when it happens eventually.
Yeah. That's always I like that reframe too. We're always like people helping people ultimately for any business.
Any
There
business,
that's true. And okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. Um I also know you pride yourself on being a leader that gets things done by building systems. So and I love that. I also pride myself on systems building. Sometimes people it resonates with others, some people don't see the world that way. But I wanted to ask you just some of the stuff you mentioned is like, having the clarity of alignment, the hiring for the right people and the right job. Things shift throughout the business, right? Like things change for people, things change for business. How do you see the role of systems playing in kind of meeting the shifting needs of organization and that fit with the people that they need in the right seats?
so I think systems are two-part, right? The first part is the actual structure.
Hmm.
How do things work? Those standard operating
Hmm.
procedures within the company. Does everybody know them? What are they? Do you know them? I had somebody ask me the other day, "What do you even do for work?" I had to go back and check and say, "What do I do and how does it all work?" Right?
Right.
We always get that question during the, interview, "Well, what does the day and the job really look like?" And you're always like, "Oh, I don't know. I've never worked in that position. I own the place."
Right. Yeah.
Right? But it's really as the owner or executive level, do you know what your employees are doing on a daily basis? Do they know?
Yep.
Were they trained?
Yep.
We do staff training. So we come in and train your staff because many times your executive level leadership does not know
Right.
what the people do,
Yep.
right? So that's the part one being systems. I think part two does come down to the tech.
Yes. Perfect. Yeah.
Are you properly using CRM software? Are you leveraging AI? There's so much out there that can make sure that things are going to the right places. You don't want to get stuck in a bottleneck of, oh, okay, well, I just consulted with a company this morning. They have leads coming in, maybe 300 leads every month. By the time they're calling the leads,
But
they've
job's done.
already right? They've already found something. So
Yeah.
I was like, "Wait a minute. You're only landing 30, you're getting over 200 a month.
Right.
Why is it taking so long to return these calls and follow up?" Well, their software wasn't getting it.
Yeah.
They weren't using the software. They were copying and pasting into a spreadsheet, and then it goes to this person. I said,
Mm.
"No, no, no.
Right.
No, 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 something's wrong." Right?
Right.
So the tech is such a big part of it,
Yes.
and I think that when you know what your day to day looks like, then you can identify when the tech isn't working or you're not using it properly. But if you don't know the expectation is, what you even do in a day, how can you know if the software is working or not?
Yes. 100%. I mean, always, that's one of the themes that's come out a lot of these conversations. There's such a huge focus needs to be on, I call them back to basics. So, you mentioned it's like people, always people doing things. Now you're talking about processes, right? Structures, the flow of actual work. And then the tech that supports all of it, right? And it's really like getting that in place is really the recipe for success. It just gets
Exactly.
complicated in so many ways. It's hard to like articulate all at once.
Call it the part one, the part two, because really, like sometimes when I'm training staff, I train them to do it old fashioned on paper, pen and paper, right? Because if you know the job, then you can know the job on the computer.
Yeah,
Right. Once
absolutely.
once you know it, you say, "Oh, wow, the computer is helping me, the tech is helping me." But if you don't even know it, you may think the tech is working and not realizing, wow, it's taking, 6 days to get a lead, and then being shocked, "Why are our sales down? I have no idea."
You're like, "We're gonna put on an alert, so this comes in and we're just jumping on the
We're
leads."
on it.
Like,
Yeah, yeah,
we're not
but
handholding them through the funnel for a
right,
month.
right, and their employees are like, "Oh, well, we usually return calls within 7 days." I'm thinking, where are your SOPs, your standard operating procedures that say they get returned in, 2 hours, right? So it's just it's a little bit of staff, but really I always try to put it back and say, at an org level, what can we do? At the higher level, how can we fix it?
Yeah, that's totally makes a lot of sense, and I completely agree in my opinion as well. Actually, I'd love to pick at your example a little bit more because it's such a valuable example. But let's say you have, agents handling, like that's the incoming leads. They are kind of just doing what they think or was done before, right? And they're kind of burying those
Mhm.
leads. They're following a system like you're, clipping it here, we're following here that I email that guy. I take a week, he takes a week, I'll follow up eventually. But, there's so much can be lost in that just kind of like the flow that was developed that came to be for some reason, and that's, and there was always a good reason, but overall, somebody comes in and it's like, why is this 8 steps from leads to action? But now it's like if each of those people in that chain really understood their role and purpose. So like, okay, convert leads to opportunities to converts to sales. And they really understood that each of those leads is a direct link to the outcome that they are there responsible to do. And, then they can, arguably be like, seeing their own the fact that they're like, it's wasting time, dropping, not being picked up in time. But a lot of times I find this, let's say, is I call it as like business acumen, is what I would kind of call it. Like I understand the link, my purposeful link to the goals. I understand, the basics of business, how to connect it. But a lot of times organizations don't necessarily help people with developing some of that acumen because, you know, and especially when we think about middle management or some sort of middle kind of operational level, it's kind of like, well, they should just do stuff. We can't invest in them to learn some of these, you know, these things. But then the outcome is you're dropping leads, from 200 to 30, and that's going to have a huge impact on your profit or, top and bottom line, whichever way we're to look at it. So I just wonder what your thoughts are on, helping kind of develop, let's say, develop acumens at these different levels, because they ultimately, every single person is connected to the outcomes. Otherwise, their job wouldn't exist, right?
Exactly. Well, I really think it's that point where consulting does come into play. So me, I have a consulting company, TPP Partner Inc. I also am in collaboration with other consultants, Good Tell Advisory. So we have between a whole team, a financial background and that business background. So when we go in, we can look at the books, we can identify, wow, you've spent $150 every lead, 200 plus leads a month. You've only gotten 30 sale. What is going on? But when those departments don't work together, it gets missed,
Yeah,
right? It's the same thing with the staff. When they don't work together, they say, "Okay, well, my job is take these leads, put them into this, spreadsheet. Okay, well,
right.
my job is to make these calls." When you don't have that collective mindset, don't get to the finish line, right? You
Yeah,
don't really get the most value out of that position. And I really think that the way to overcome that, even if it's once every year or twice every year, doing that training, getting everybody, even in a room. Like sometimes there are staff that come in one shift, staff that are in another shift, where you have an office in one location and the staff over here. They don't know. And you'd be surprised how much the employees actually do know about the business. And they may be
yes,
thinking it, but there just hasn't been that collective time, that staff meeting, like staff meetings are
yes.
going out of style. Nobody has them to come and say, "Hey," just to catch up, right? So what I do is I come in, I do a training, and then they carry that on, whether it's a monthly staff meeting or just a weekly catch up or whatever they do to say, "Hey, this is what's going on in my role." A lot of problems can be fixed with, I call it over communication. Don't just communicate, over communicate, because you would be surprised what everybody knows.
Yeah. I agree with that as well. I think you raised a couple of good points, like that somebody looking at this externally can trigger discussions and analysis that might not come from internally, where people are just doing things the way we do them, kind of thought. So somebody externally can be very beneficial in looking at that. I completely agree. And then it's kind of resetting constantly. Some of the training is moving pieces, and then not just running the training and getting people to do a really good job, but create space for them to think and analyze and share valuable information. But that comes also for sure in a premium these days, right? Because we are so overloaded, right? Our calendars are full, the demands are coming out of everywhere. Creating some of that space to think and over communicate is a challenge in itself. But it's critical.
Even looking into to ways, okay, we don't have time to have a formal meeting, even having something like a group chat, even having something like, some type of system where people in different areas can connect
Hmm.
makes a huge difference. I tell businesses, we don't need to move mountains the first day. We don't need to come in and fix everything in one day, but let's take a step forward instead of saying, "Oh, well, it's too big, it's too hard, there's no money, there's no time, we're not going to do it." Well, what can we do?
Hmm.
This is the budget. Even if the budget's 0, okay, what can we do with what we already have? How can we fix something, right? There's always a way to
Hmm.
work out something, even if it only I say only, but if it increases your profit by 5%, well, that 5%, there's the money right there to fix it.
Yeah, exactly. Again, it goes again and again, and it's like you're off to the
You're
races.
there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Awesome. No, that's very helpful. I was going to ask you about and we talked a little bit about hiring and also, but how do you balance during a growth phase? How do you think about balancing, kind of that internal capability building versus hiring externally? Adding the right pieces to what is developing already for that magic to work together. And it comes with dangers, pros and cons on both sides. So I was just wondering if you could share with us your thoughts on how you balance that external versus external.
So
Right.
even though companies don't often do like a blind resume where they don't know whose resume they're
Hmm.
looking at, which is like the best way, but
Yeah.
if they don't have that, then when you're looking at a resume, don't even think, "Oh, this is my employee, this is this." Just have an opportunity, everybody to apply internal, external, and look at, okay, who is the best fit?
Mhm.
Interview them, meet them. Even if you want to hire internal because, there's somebody there, a superstar, that's great. But when you interview them, oftentimes there's no interview. They're just like, "Oh, your promotion, yay." There's like
Right,
a
right.
2-second meeting. Bring them in for that interview.
Mm,
Go through and really analyze it because, like I said, there's other ways to incentivize besides just promotions. I think that still take the necessary steps and go through. Almost every time that I've seen it, when people receive a promotion, their employment doesn't last much longer.
mm,
That's been my view when I go into different companies and see, okay, the turnover. You have an employee here for 10 years, they get a promotion, and then within the next 3 or 4 years, they're gone, and you say, "Well, what happened?" "Oh, well,
mm,
they weren't really the right fit."
mm.
And I think that it was just because they didn't go through that process all over again.
Right.
It's a new role. It's not the same role.
It's not the same role. I mean, I totally agree, and that is, the data shows a huge drop off, and it can happen. You're right. Like somebody can have their own track record of succeeding at individual contributor role for a really long time in that environment. So it's not the wrong fit for the environment because they were there. A lot of times happens in this growth. Basically, there's two big drop offs. They happen a lot in mid career in general, and then certainly from that individual contributor to team leader or manager role, there's big drop offs. And I've been wanting to pick at those and just get people's anecdotal experiences with that immense data that exists. One of my hypotheses is midlife, like we get swarmed with demands in all aspects of life, and that certainly has an impact on us at work. But there's also this like transition from individual contributor to team leader. It is a different job, right? It's a different set of concerns. Like all of a sudden, it's not your work that you're being, rated on. It's your team's work, and it's a very different set of skills actually required to deliver on that. Do you see a role in companies to help people with that transition? And I totally hear you on your, the incentivization of it. So if you're doing it just to get to the manager role or to get more money, that's a challenge for sure. But let's say it's actually more like actual growth and advancement. How can we help, or how can companies help with that kind of jump into the different set of responsibilities?
Right. Well, if that employee is doing their role perfectly
Hmm.
to a T, they are probably in the right seat on the bus for that role. That's why they're perfect at it. It's
Yeah.
it's a great role for them. If they're
Right.
overachieving and doing extra work or doing, let's say a better job, or you see potential to say, wow, this person has potential to do more. Well, then at that point you say, well, is there another role? Right. And I really think that what it boils down to is when they get to that new role because they've excelled or because you've seen, that potential or they've applied, whatever have you, there still needs to be that formal process, that training.
Yep.
Sometimes people don't do the training because their training just looks like introduction to our company 101, right? And
Mm,
it's not actually training for the role. But
mm.
some people do training in-house, some people hire. At the end of it, they still need to go through training. It's still a new role.
Okay. All right, I know. I feel like I was picking at you a little bit, pushing on that, but I
Yeah.
think that's the gap. I'm so curious, so that's really why. But I like that. Yeah, you're right. I can see that. To me, that kind of clarifies. It's the training for the role and including the people, the works and the tech, and can't assume that they know it just because you're right. They might know the culture, like all kinds of things that a new employee can skip, but there's still the training for the actual specific role, which includes the idea of people management training.
Exactly.
Okay. Do you find that organizations have that kind of people management training, like that kind of side of things, or that probably depends, right?
Very rarely. So coming
Yeah.
from, the legal background, obviously
Right.
we've dealt with employment disputes, and you think, "Wow, what was that person doing in that role?" Right?
Yeah.
And when you ask, "Well, what was the training like?" And there was no training, or the training was
Yeah.
someone that they appointed to be a manager who also did not have training, so now we're
Yeah.
just repeating the cycle. as a business consultant, the companies that work with me are ones who, or want the training, so they're seeking me out. But I think a lot of companies just don't even realize that their training is
Yes.
not meeting them.
Yes. Okay, yeah, that I completely agree. It seems like not an imperative function because you're like, "Oh, we just need to do things," but then you realize it's the people who are doing the things to get you the and they need that support. Um,
Exactly, exactly. I know we had, at one of the companies I owned, we had an HR person, right, doing the training. And I
mm,
say, "They're great at HR," but I'm thinking to myself, "They don't
yes.
know how to train," because you know why? Number 1, they've never had experience in that role.
Yeah.
Right? They don't even, their our HR was in a different city. So I'm thinking, well, why we got to change this. Why are we bringing someone now that's never even seen the role in action to train for them? It doesn't make sense. Again, budget. You have to see what you're dealing with. But I think just creating that, even if you train one person because of your resources, then they can train. That's better than no training at all.
Yes, I agree. I agree, and you brought up a really good important point. There is a lot, and having spoken to a lot of HR leaders over the last few years, this is kind of what happens. A lot of people think, "Oh, it's a people issue, so go to HR." Well, HR, it's not necessarily that they are. HR can have training capabilities, but it's not necessarily synonymous with their job either. In fact, depending on the type of training, needs to like come from other places or be, actually intentionally designed and implemented. With yeah, okay,
Right,
perfect. Yeah.
and if you know that that's an area of weakness, you can put that in a job description because what you don't wanna do from that legal side is bring somebody on, let's say, in one role and then be like, "Oh, now you have to train." That's a different job
Different.
duty that you didn't have before that you're not gonna compensate more for, and then you have work culture issue, and then you have pay issue,
Yes.
right? It's just issue after issue. So just to say, "Oh, this person's great. Okay, go train them," while their job isn't training. They're not being
Yeah, we need a trainer for that.
right? And employees talk about you, don't think they don't.
Yeah.
So that now that's gonna be, "Oh, my boss makes me work. I had to train these people. That's not my job. I'm not getting paid." Right? And it just starts that snowball that's gonna build.
Yeah.
So you're really to think about that as you're hiring. That's why I really say, look at the business plan, look at your job duties, look at, your org chart, look at everything as a collective. Because if you need that, put it in the job before you hire.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it's just like with all the best things, it's the payoff of figuring this out is huge for success of your company, but also there's no simple, silver bullet like they say, right? It's actually looking at that whole ecosystem of what are you trying to do, like like what does it look like, where like people jobs, how does the work flow through the team? It's a complex answer. So I know in your current role, you're working with different organizations in your consulting role. It sounds like you're bringing them a lot of experience across these industries, which I'm sure it makes you very valuable addition to the teams. Going in now with that lens of starting to work with multiple organizations, if you could have like a magic wand to help you with this complex uh, ecosystems that you tackle one after another, what would you wish for to either you as a tool or that organizations had at their disposal to make this job simpler?
I really wish that people spent more time on their business development in those early stages. The
Mm,
business plan, again, the org chart. Like if people really
right.
standard operating, like if people really looked at their organization early on, it would avoid a lot of issues, business issues, financial issues, and legal risks. Right?
Mm,
If they would just take a day and really think it through, I think they would arrive there, and I think that it would be so beneficial. The employees wouldn't be burning out. The employees would be happier. The culture would be better. But I've been there, right? You're starting a business, you're scaling, you're growing, you don't, you're still figuring it out.
yeah.
Even for my businesses, I wish that when I started, I hired a consultant or I worked with someone to get more knowledge. I could have avoided a lot of headaches myself. And I
Mhm.
wish that other business owners could avoid those same headaches and that the employees would have a better experience.
Well, we're back towards the end of the conversations. We're back where we started. It takes clarity on what you're doing, how you're doing it, and then managing that along the way. And then that's how organizations and people can win as well in their own roles. So thank you so much, Brenell, for sharing your diverse experience in this area. Is there anything else that you want to add to the conversation today?
You know what? Thank you so much for just having me here. It's
Mhm.
been so exciting, and I really hope that business owners and employees both can take a few tidbits back and fix
Yes.
a few mistakes along the way.
Yes. Thank you so much, Brenell. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.